Newsline investigators getting ready for a briefing in Toronto where a plane crash happened yesterday. We are learning now this morning 19 people have been released from the hospital. And of course, the left is already out trying to blame President Trump for this accident in Canada.
This is going to yet again raise the concern about FAA staffing, air traffic control staffing.
Also uncovering the truth, you won't believe what DOJ just found. The Social Security Administration paying for people who are 150 years old. That can't be right. One congressman is tired of the left's scripted outrage. Coming up on today's program, we speak to Congressman Ben Cline about that and more. And speaking of Elon Musk, he's calling it the smartest AI on earth. But what is Grok 3 and how can you really use it? Also, Eric Adams' political future is up in the air. Will New York Governor Kathy Hochul really remove him as mayor of New York City? There is a legal route she can take. But what does this all mean for his political future? Well, today's news and newsmakers all starts right now. Hi, everybody, and welcome into Newsline. Great to have you with us. I'm Bianca De La Garza. Our top story today, of course, we are waiting to find out more on the plane crash in Toronto. Obviously, a story that's been developing. How did the Delta jet operated by Endeavour Air flip while landing at the airport? Was it pilot error, mechanical failure, weather-related, perhaps winds, or something else? Tracking the latest right now as we await news from the airport. Correspondent Michael Charbonne, he is live for us in Toronto. And you know, when I watched that video yesterday with you, Michael, obviously a miracle that everyone survived this crash.
Bianca, pleasure to be with you, and God bless all those souls, because at 2:45 yesterday Eastern, a Delta Airlines plane, flight 4819 out of Minneapolis, which is a CRJ 900, a twin-engine Bombardier short-haul airplane. It was filled with 76 people and 4 crew members on a 2-hour flight from Minneapolis. It's believed, Bianca, that 45-degree headwinds and potentially 40-mile-per-hour crosswinds had an effect on this if you combined the ground effects and the snow. When the plane landed, what happened was it favored its right-hand side. When it favored the right-hand side, it snapped off the wing, which then rotated the fuselage, snapped off the secondary wing and the tail, and left the fuselage as it was, intact with people strapped in. It landed at about 120 miles per hour. And think of this, the tail, the wings were all filled with gas. So when they were getting out of the airplane, they were saying they smelled gas. Gas was coming down from the windows. And it just goes to the integrity of this plane that these people are alive. Because if the wings were hard attached, as one would say, to the fuselage, it would have ripped it up, Bianca, and we would have had a catastrophic example here in Toronto.
So frightening when you see it, Michael. And obviously, we are waiting for the authorities to give us another update there. Thank you so much. We'll continue to track that story for you folks. Another big story, of course, we are tracking is the major talks that are happening in Saudi Arabia over potentially ending the Ukraine-Russia war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Russian officials have agreed to restore embassy staffing. Rubio saying the two sides also agreed to create a high-level team to negotiate peace and promote economic cooperation. The agreement is part of larger peace talks that are happening this week in Riyadh, both countries, without any Ukrainian officials, though, in the room. And now today, also breaking that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was in the area in the UAE, says he will not now go to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia tomorrow, as initially had been announced. Tracking all the newest information for us, let's get over to our senior correspondent, John Heidi, with the latest. John?
Yeah, and Bianca, Zelensky said that he was postponing his trip to Saudi Arabia until mid-March, saying he wanted to avoid, quote-unquote, coincidences. That is, suggesting basically that he didn't want his trip linked to the ongoing talks between the U.S. and Russia. Today, though, on that note, Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Russian officials, including Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, a major departure, I should add, from the Biden administration's and its refusal to meet with any Russian officials throughout the course of the war in Ukraine and to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. And on that note, here's in part what Secretary Rubio had to say. Listen.
For 3.5 years while this conflict has raged, or 3 years while it's raged, no one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can. So no one is being sidelined here.
Now, Rubio said also that he added that the U.S. and Russia delegation established 4 principles, and that is 1, to work to reestablish diplomatic missions in Washington and Moscow, as you talked about in the lead, Bianca. 2, to appoint a high-level set of teams to help with the negotiations to end the war. 3, to discuss the geopolitical and economic cooperation to ultimately help end the war. And then finally, to remain engaged in the overall process. Now, while the Trump administration is moving ahead with these peace talks, Ukrainian President Zelensky repeated that his country would, quote, never accept a peace deal struck by the U.S. if Ukraine was not involved in those talks. Now, Zelensky, as I said, postponed his trip to Saudi Arabia and said that he was, quote unquote, surprised, like many others, about the Russian-American meeting. He said, I don't know who will stay there, who will leave, who is going where. To be honest, I don't care. What I care about is for the partners not to overthink something about us. Secretary Rubio also meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other Trump administration officials, part of that meeting also Monday, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Mideast Envoy Steve Witkoff, who we saw in the meetings, obviously with Russian officials. Discussion focused on Gaza, the war in Ukraine. With Gaza, the State Department said Rubio and the Crown Prince discussed the, quote, importance of an arrangement for Gaza that contributes to regional security, and that includes shared interest in Syria and Lebanon as well, Bianca.
John, I also want to ask you, I know there's been a lot of momentum with hostage talks as well between Israel and Hamas. Yeah. What are you hearing about the latest release? I know that there were some planned for Thursday.
Yeah, and by the way, an Israeli delegation is planning to go back to Cairo, I believe, next week. But as far as an update here, and there was some breaking news that came out earlier, Bianca, Hamas said that it will release 6 more hostages this weekend, and the bodies of 4 hostages on Thursday, and that includes the bodies of Kafir and Ariel Bibas. Kafir was the youngest hostage at 9 months old. His brother was 4 years old. We've talked so much about this family on this program and throughout the course of the fighting. We still do not know the fate of their mother, Shiri. Hamas had said that they were all killed. Israel obviously saying they were murdered. Their father, Yarden, was released, as we know, during the hostage exchange back on February 1st, immediately asking about the fate of his wife and children. Well, now we're getting a pretty clear and tragic answer to that question, Bianca.
Certainly our worst fears. We knew some of the hostages would just be bodies, and now this is terrible news, obviously. John, thank you for updating us on that as we also watch developments over in Riyadh today. I'm pleased to bring in our next guest to talk about some of the progress that's being made with these talks. Our guest, Naval Intelligence Officer, Republican strategist John Jordan. He's also an overseer at Stanford's Hoover Institute. And joining us today, also retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General, Combat C-17 Commander, and the former Deputy Military Representative to NATO for the United States, Blaine Holt, a Newsmax contributor. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. So obviously there's a real potential of some type of deal happening. We just saw some of the framework. John, I'll let you start here. Does it matter that Zelensky isn't going this week? I did note he says he'll reschedule for March 10th, and Donald Trump has a big speech in front of Congress before that.
Yeah, right now, what I suspect's been happening, Bianca, is this process is far more advanced than is widely being led on. You wouldn't send the foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov, and you wouldn't have Rubio in the same room at this point unless a lot of the preliminaries were worked out. They're still building trust, still ironing out frameworks, but these meetings are more about introducing these concepts to the world and acclimating the public to the idea that a deal may be coming, and these are about the terms which they're going to be. Because basically, at the end of the day, love it or hate it, it's what the United States and Russia decide. Those are going to be the terms. The Europeans don't really have a say, and the Ukrainians are going to have to be brought along. And Zelensky needs, for domestic political purposes, needs to appear to be part of that process, but and he will be brought in later, but just not right now.
Like it or hate it, well, Europe wasn't liking it at all. We know they called that emergency meeting, but a lot of folks, Blaine, are saying, hey, you were at the Munich Security Council. There was a lot of, opportunity for Europeans, and they just didn't even on Monday in an emergency meeting come out with any ideas.
Yeah, they have not changed at all. And this is how Europe made themselves irrelevant in these talks. Their rhetoric over the last 3 years has been nothing but inflammatory. They refused to talk to President Putin. Kaja Kallas, the foreign minister of the EU, has said, why would I talk to him? He's a war criminal. That's not the stage you set for diplomatic engagement and off-ramping a war. So here's the great contrast that makes this so crazy. You've got a group at an emergency meeting in Europe that wants to keep the war going, while you've got the two biggest superpowers militarily in the world coming together to talk about how to stabilize Europe and get the war behind them. So diplomacy is something we haven't seen in 3 years. It's now emerging. The U.S. is leading. Europe doesn't like the leading.
And obviously, there's more than just ending this conflict. Having these talks also in Riyadh is somewhat a critical piece potentially for energy, for OPEC, for bringing oil prices down, which obviously would be immediate relief for inflation. John, as an economist, can you walk us through what you think Donald Trump's other goals may be in this?
Yeah, remember, Bianca, the hyperinflation during the Carter years wasn't caused by fiscal policy or anything like that. It was an exogenous, it was an oil shock that caused that. No other commodity, really is as inflationary or disinflationary as oil, because it goes oil, diesel to harvest corn, plastics. It's everywhere in the economy. President Trump has a chance to really bring down inflation quickly if he can bring down energy prices. And this is all part of that, putting some of that Russian oil back on stream, even if the rest of the sanctions stay in pace, and getting OPEC to accelerate their production increases, which they have scheduled for later in the year, to move that up. If you knock $5-10 off the price of oil, inflation in the United States is largely solved, and then the Fed can go to reducing interest rates, and then the economy will be off to the races.
The story behind the story that's also playing out potentially here with some of these talks and sideline conversations. All right, both of you are pilots. Well, I have you here. We're waiting a news conference from the Toronto International Airport. The video is truly incredible. I'll let you both weigh in on what we know so far and what may have caused this jet, Endeavour Air, obviously a subsidiary of Delta, to flip over. And many say it's a miracle that everyone on board survived. Blaine?
Yeah, it is a miracle. We're going to have to wait and see on a lot of things. I think that the last clip you had of some commentator who said something about the FAA is ridiculous. This is a flying event, and it looks like the pilot dragged a wing. Just hearing what the winds were could have been causal in this, but there's a lot of human factors to go. But again, this rests with the aircraft commander and their judgment on the conditions to land in. No FAA controller, no controller in Canada can fly that person's jet for them. And so we'll have to learn more.
John, we're glad that people are getting out of the hospital. It's frightening video when you watch it. And some are saying it was coming down, descending more rapidly than it should have.
Okay, so first of all, I agree with everything Blaine just said there. That previous guy had no idea what he was talking about. So what happens in a crosswind, that makes the level of difficulty more difficult because you have a force acting laterally on the airplane as it's coming down. And there are a lot of different control inputs that are constantly being put in and taken out, depending upon how much crosswind energy that airplane is absorbing and how much the pilot has to correct for that. And every airplane is a certified limit for that. And so that'll be looked at. The crosswind is almost certainly going to be a variable in this to some degree. As for the eyewitnesses' perception of it coming down faster or slower, also as a lawyer, there's few things that are less reliable than eyewitnesses, especially against a white background where you can't perceive distances or really have great depth perception. So they'll look at the black box, which is really orange, the cockpit voice recorder, and get a sense of what was going on in that airplane and combine that with the weather conditions. And this accident is going to be solved pretty quickly.
Well, we await that news conference, and maybe some of those really good questions will be asked there. John Jordan, Blaine Holt, appreciate you both. Thanks for being with us today here, guys.
Thank you.
And a lot more ahead for you today on Newsline. It is a Doge showdown, folks. The acting head of the Social Security resigns. This, as we know, Elon Musk revealing some startling statistics on who is getting Social Security checks. Coming up, Congressman Ben Cline. A federal judge is allowing Doge to continue accessing sensitive records from at least 3 federal agencies. This comes after unions and nonprofit groups attempted to stop Musk and Doge from accessing records at the Departments of Labor, Health and Human Services, and the Consumer Financial Bureau. Let's get out to host of Sunday Report, John Glasgow, who is live with the latest. And Doge is racking up some big wins in court. John?
Bianca, that's right. And more wins could be coming in this latest ruling. A U.S. district judge says President Trump was right in categorizing Doge as an agency, and more judges could come up with the same ruling in other cases. So what we know right now is we're waiting on another ruling here from U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, who appeared to lean in favor of the Trump administration, rejecting efforts to block Elon Musk from accessing federal government data. So Judge Chutkan, she suggested that the lawsuit filed by the Democrat states lacked evidence to block Doge from doing its work. Meantime, a federal judge in Washington ruled in a similar way, allowing Doge to access student data at the Education Department. Now, it would seem that these cases brought by the Democrats, they have no merit since Trump was elected. The president is allowed to consult with whomever he chooses regarding how the government operates. Musk is considered a special government employee appointed by Trump. And Doge is a component of the executive office of the president. The Department of Government Efficiency is an overhauled version of an agency originally created by President Obama. So left-wing media, they're falsely claiming that Musk and Doge staffers are independent actors, when in fact they're executive officials who answer to the president. So the president has the constitutional authority to consult with government employees and delegate them to inspect government records. So remember, the chief executive is accountable to the public for the operation of those agencies whose records are being reviewed. Also, Elon Musk has no authority to fire anyone or to cut government spending, but he can make recommendations. So it's up to the president to take action, which is what we are seeing happening right now. So Bianca, it would seem that the Democrats are not nearly as worried about the records that Musk has access to as they are about what Musk says publicly regarding those records. We'll send it back to you.
All right. Great to see you, John. Thank you for that update there. And folks, again, we are waiting for a news conference to begin any moment. A live look here. The podium has been set. This is Toronto, where the airplane crashing yesterday, everyone survived, fortunately, but we'll take you there when the officials do come out. And also ahead for you, a little bit more with Elon Musk. He says the Grok 3 will revolutionize the field of AI. How can you use it? Our computer and AI experts give us the lowdown. Also, New York Governor Kathy Hochul weighing the political fate of New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Lee Klein, Congressman, putting it all out there, saying he's fed up with that scripted outrage of the left, their lies about Doge. Trump campaigned on using Musk's expertise to make government more efficient. Trump won, and he's keeping that promise. Virginia Congressman writing also to his constituents, saying that the real threat to Americans' privacy has come from an unchecked bureaucracy that has mismanaged data security for decades. The reforms proposed by President Trump and implemented by individuals like Mr. Musk are designed to prevent government overreach, not expand it. Pleased to have Congressman Ben Cline right here with us. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you.
So it's amazing to watch the Musk derangement syndrome, as they're now calling it. But I do want to ask you if any of this is true. There's an article in Politico saying that some members of the GOP are actually trying to push back on Musk's cuts. It lists, a few folks like Republican Kansas Senator Jerry Moran, Idaho Congressman Mike Simpson, and Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy. So those are some names, obviously. Is there any inner turmoil from what you're hearing?
No, the overwhelming majority of Republicans are really working hard to help Donald Trump implement his agenda and clean up the bureaucracy. You know, we campaigned on it. Go back and look at the campaign ads of members in both the House and the Senate, from Republicans to conservatives to moderates. Everybody campaigned on streamlining the bureaucracy, making government work more efficiently. And now that they're doing it, you have some who are defenders of that same bureaucracy want to stand up and say, oh, don't cut that specific grant or that specific funding because that I'm working on.
Doge has a lot of wins, and some of them are legal. We just outlined some of them, Congressman Klein, and we were just showing some video of that news conference in the Oval Office, about Social Security, people who are 150. I mean, it's not even possible. And now we have the report, as you probably know, the acting head of Social Security Administration, Michelle King, resigned, disputing Doge's efforts to access government records. So obviously, people are getting out of the way. Where there's smoke, there's fire, they say.
Yeah, look at that chart, and it just shows you the age range for recipients of benefits. Some may say it's a computer glitch, some kind of technical error, but what I see is inefficiency, and what I see is taxpayer dollars being wasted. If money that the taxpayers earned and sent to Washington is going to pay for benefits for people who don't deserve them, then we need to get to the bottom of it. And I commend Elon Musk for really working hard to get to the bottom of where taxpayer dollars are going.
Now, you're a busy guy. You're on House Judiciary Committee. You're also on the House Budget Committees as well, Congressman Klein. And we know there was sort of this marathon meeting. The House Budget Committee last week passed a budget to implement Trump's legislative agenda. So now it goes to full vote and, of course, to the upper chamber. These are things he's campaigned on, no tax on tips, important things that Americans really are hoping he delivers on. How is the progress going? And do you think it will clear the House with a full vote?
I am optimistic that it's going to clear the House. We only have a 2-seat majority right now, and we need to get this done quickly. Implementing Trump's agenda is going to get our economy back on track, secure the border, make sure we're energy independent, help to address inflation. And so we've got this one big bill that we're trying to pass. We need to get it done as soon as possible. And so I'm anxious to go to the floor next week and have a victory for the president and for the country.
Speaker Johnson thinks it could be unanimous. We're watching it closely. We appreciate your time today, Congressman Ben Klein of Virginia. Thanks for stopping by here on Newsline. Breaking news right now. We want to take you to Toronto. The news conference on yesterday's plane crash just began. Let's listen in.
Delays and cancellations across this part of Canada and the U.S. Northeast during this time, creating numerous flight delays and backlogs. At Toronto Pearson, 221 of 974 scheduled flights were canceled on Thursday. 75 of 1,012 scheduled flights were canceled on Friday. 128 of 937 scheduled flights were canceled on Saturday, and 371 of 987 scheduled flights were canceled on Sunday. Monday was a clear day, though, and it was an operational recovery day for Toronto Pearson, with 1,006 scheduled flights. The results yesterday, in due part to the accident, were 462 scheduled flights canceled and 544 flights operated. Let's now talk about the investigation and what to expect in the next few days as we pivot to this phase. Last night, 7 members of the Transportation Safety Board of Canada arrived at Toronto Pearson to begin the investigation. 13 more of those investigators arrived today. Members of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration are also here on site, participating in the investigation. As it is a Mitsubishi aircraft, Mitsubishi will be here on site as well, and Delta Airlines has sent their GO team who are already here on site. So what does this all mean for operations at Toronto Pearson today and in the days ahead? Our Emergency Operations Center does remain open, though operations on the runways resumed at 5 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday. We have been in recovery mode since resuming flights at 5 p.m. yesterday, catching up on delayed flights, and that continues into today as well. We are currently without use of our longest east-west and north-south runways. This and ongoing expected additional weather conditions today will affect how fast we recover operations, particularly with departure of aircraft. We do expect that the investigators on site will be reviewing the aircraft on its current configuration on the runway for the next 48 hours. And we are looking to get to support that investigation and the removal of that aircraft off the runway, at which point we can do our inspections and then return that runway into service. Toronto Pearson will continue to provide you all with operational updates, but this is now an active investigation time, and you can expect to start hearing more from the investigating authorities about the accident that happened here. We expect that the Transportation Safety Board of Canada will be issuing a statement with more information around that later this afternoon. In closing, I thank the industry, the community, and all of our employees here and across the sector for all the work that they are doing to support this incident and those affected, and that they do every day. Air travel remains the safest form of transportation. We are proud of that record here, and at times like these, we're very grateful and thankful of how the community and the industry comes together as one. Thank you.
We'll now take a few questions. Folks who maybe can come up to the mics if possible, or if there's a mic in the audience. Okay.
Sure. Hi there. Alex Capriello with News Nation. A question about the conditions yesterday. Obviously, you just explained the extent of the snowstorms that came over the past few days. Wondering if there's been any developments or any comment about what exactly it was like on the runway in terms of iciness or wind gusts. Last night we heard the fire chief say that he did not believe that that played a role in this crash at all. Is that still the theory here? And if so, do we have any developments on what caused the crash if it wasn't weather related?
Okay.
Yeah, this would not be a time for us to have theory or to speculate on what caused the crash. So as I shared, we have a number of agencies that are here that are responsible for doing a thorough and full and complete investigation to determine all the causal factors. And we are looking forward to getting those results and to sharing those. And those will be shared very publicly once they are received.
And I understand that if you don't want to speculate about the crash, but can you tell us then what the condition of the runway was like at that time of the impact? I mean, was it slick? Have your teams been able to determine that?
I look forward to sharing all of that information at the proper time. Again, those are all the details that are going to be covered during this investigation, and that is active currently.
Viosa Isai from the New York Times. I have one question and a follow-up. Does air traffic control handle CRJs differently than other aircraft in crosswinds?
All right, we've been listening to Deborah Flint, the CEO of the Greater Toronto Airports, and talking about the latest on the plane. 21 people injured, 19 sent to the hospital, now released. A miracle that everyone did survive, though. Delta has a GO team on site. That plane is still on the tarmac. They expect it to be there for the next 48 hours. Asked about the potential for what caused the crash. Was it potentially something with the runway? They artfully sort of dodged that. Again, we'll bring you up to date on all the new details as they come into us here on the Toronto plane crash. But as she clearly stated, there will be some delays as they are still in recovery mode there as well, and one runway shut down still. Come at me, at least for now. Will Eric Adams remain in office? Well, it may be up to New York's Governor Kathy Hochul. She was planning to have an emergency meeting, and she may decide the fate of Eric Adams and whether or not he stays or goes. Hochul says she will meet with key leaders to discuss removing Adams from office today. The governor releasing a statement saying here, in part, in the 235 years of New York State history, these powers have never been utilized to remove a duly elected mayor. Overturning the will of the voters is a serious step that should not be taken lightly. And then goes on to say, that said, the alleged conduct at City Hall that has been reported over the past 2 weeks is troubling and cannot be ignored. Hochul's statement comes as 4 of Adams' top deputies announced their resignations on Monday amidst the alleged quid pro quo, some say, with the Justice Department to drop criminal charges against him in exchange for Adams aiding the Trump administration's immigration policies. But there are others saying that the case just wasn't strong enough against Adams, and perhaps saying things about the Biden administration is what got him indicted to begin with. Pleased to bring in senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, this is a fascinating one here. I mean, Hochul has the power in her statement. She says it's never been used in 235 years. That said, what's happened in the past 2 weeks? My big question is, well, what about when he was indicted? She didn't seem to care then about him keeping his position as mayor.
I think, and I really, it's a pleasure to be with you, of course, Bianca. I really don't
Always.
carry water for her, but I think she feels that now that the senior people in the administration have resigned, that's all of his deputy mayors have resigned, all of his senior people, except the police commissioner and the fire commissioner, have resigned, that he does not have the effective tools with which to run the city government. That's the best argument I can make for her as to why she's doing this now. If she removes him from office, Bianca, he's removed immediately. And then there's this 30-day period during which the Jumaane Williams, who's the city public advocate, becomes the acting mayor, and during which, listen to this, Governor Hochul has to hold a hearing at which she is the judge and the prosecutor to interrogate the mayor, and he has an opportunity to defend himself.
Well, we know Williams has already said he'll take the job. He actually put out a post today on X. I guess there's some people that say he's not really a great option either. You know, that he says, I've been awake for hours. I don't know if he's got a reputation, some say, for not being, you know, as on the job or as quick to it. But all right, so Hochul's got immense power here. She can do this. But politically, Judge, then what happens with Adams? I mean, couldn't he also maybe potentially run again? There's, you know, another race coming up. Maybe he runs as a Republican. How about that?
Yes, he has already intimated that he might run as a Republican. Look, the former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, no secret, is considering running in the Democratic primary. Mayor Adams doesn't know whether or not he could defeat Governor Cuomo, but if Mayor Adams runs as a Republican, he is probably guaranteed, I say probably, somebody may challenge him in the Republican Party, he is probably guaranteed a seat or excuse me, a place on the ballot in November. This hearing that has to happen within 30 days would be very, very telling as to whether or not it's even prudent for him to seek re-election. If he can't answer the questions that she puts to him, he'll be obliterated politically. On the other hand, if he can answer the questions that she puts to him and he makes a good defense of himself, he may then be back as mayor after this 30-day interregnum.
I hear everything you're saying.
Không smoke cứ thế chạy luôn. Số 1 mà. Còn lửa ở đâu ra thế này? Còn nữa không? Em xem đỉnh đâu. biết đâu